Hey everyone, Uncle Jessy here. Today I want to talk with you about 3D printer bed adhesion, and what that means is how well your prints stick to the bed of your 3D printer. And more specifically, I want to talk about resin 3D printers and getting your prints to stick to the build plate for your resin 3D printers. When it comes to resin 3D printers, a lot of the issues with getting your prints to stick to the build plate really comes down to just build plate leveling and making sure that the build plate is properly leveled. Once you have that in place, it's all going to come down to typically the settings that you're working with on your 3D prints. But even before then, some people like to recommend sanding your build plates just slightly with some high grit sandpaper just to roughen this up a little bit. And again, this is going to vary by printer to printer that you might be working with. And this is an example of an Elegoo Saturn build plate. And I typically, if we zoom in and look closely here, you'll see little fine scratch marks where I have gone in and sanded this smooth so that it does provide a bit of better adhesion when it comes to my 3D prints. And you can even do the same thing with the flex plates. And here's a Wham Bam flex plate that I've also gone over and sanded just ever so slightly to improve the sticking of your 3D prints. So I feel like that's pretty common knowledge for anybody that's been resin 3D printing. However, one thing that I want to talk with you about is a setting that's available in most of your slicers to improve the bed adhesion, or maybe you want to decrease the bed adhesion, because that's what I'm looking at doing here today with you guys. So let me give you a little bit of background about why I'm making this and why it came up recently, and it's because I'm printing or attempting to print one of Nikko Industries' files. This is the Ultron helmet from the Marvel What If TV series. Well, it's one half of the face mask here for the helmet. I printed the actual, the wearable helmet portion on my CR10 S4 in PLA, and then for the actual shell, the face portion, I wanted to do it all in resin on the Phrozen Mega 8K. And when I made my initial video on that machine, I talked about how much of a pain it was about my prints sticking to the build plate and trying to get them off. So here I've printed the other half of that helmet, and yeah, it's going to be an absolute nightmare for me to get this off. I've already printed the one half and it was a nightmare, so I'm going to go through the process with you guys here and then adjust my settings and try to print another file and see if the changes made any improvement. And the setting that I'm talking about is the bottom exposure setting for your resin 3D printers. In Box, it's listed as bottom exposure time. In Lychee, it's under the burn-in layers section in the exposure time setting. And then on Prusa Slicer, it's the initial exposure time. What that does is the higher the value, the longer it's going to initially cure your prints against the build plate, which means it's going to have a better chance of really adhering and sticking to the build plate. So if you're having problems with your prints sticking initially, you might want to look at that setting and bumping it up a little. And in my case here with the Phrozen Mega 8K, I need to look at decreasing it. And in fact, I've already decreased it by 10 millimeters or 10 milliseconds, I should say, from the initial settings that were on the initial profiles there, with the updated profile that I've been using from AkumaMods here on YouTube. Thanks, by the way, for sharing out your profile. Also a huge Akuma Street Fighter fan. So let's try and get the print off of the build plate here. But first, I need my tools.
Tools!
All right,
I
got my tools here with me. Handy dandy sharp spatula, and I've got another that's more of an angled, so I should be able to get at a better angle to get this. I also needed to make sure to get my eye protection. I'm gonna go through and try and get this off as best I can. The problem with this is it adheres really well to this build plate because of all those holes, but all the resin cures and gets stuck in there. So what I want to do is, after I get this cleaned up, I'm going to go back into Box and revise my settings even further and go, initially I went from 40, I'm going to go down to 30, then down to 20 and test it out. I'm sure this is going to wake up my family, and I'll be getting an angry text message here in just a few minutes. I literally had to chisel that off the build plate. And I still have some cured resin that I need to clean out of the build plate. Hey there, I'm Uncle Jesse from the very near future, and I don't know it yet, but I'm gonna lose power today, and it's gonna suck. So, what you're actually seeing on screen is the actual reprint of this same file because I ended up losing a whole bunch of 3D prints today, thanks to yet another power outage in my lovely house. So 4 hours later, and our print is finished. So let's see if the build plate is a little bit easier to get the print off of. I'm already noticing back here in the very back, part of the print didn't adhere as well already. So it's still, everything's stuck there and everything looks like it printed properly. So it should, oh my goodness. That is significantly easier to remove. Also, none of the holes are now clogged with cured resin. So changing that setting, the bottom exposure layers, really helped with this particular Resin 3D printer. While I'm cleaning up this 3D print, let me tell you about today's video sponsor, which is Nikko Industries. NikkoIndustries.com is one of the premier places to buy 3D printable files for your 3D printers, including cosplay related things or items related to pop culture or video games, you name it, you'll be able to find it there. And one of the big differentiators for Nikko Industries is that if you make your own 3D printable models, you can sell those directly on his site. Or if you don't have models that you can sell and you want to sell 3D prints, you can also do that from his site. And in fact, I just sold a 3D print to someone the other day that I'm going to be shipping out tomorrow to the lucky buyer, which netted me a cool $30 for 3D printing a file that I already have permission to 3D print and sell. If you're interested in more information about NikkoIndustries.com, you'll find links down below to his site as well as amazing Patreon where you can get free monthly files that you can also print and sell online. Thanks again to Nikko for sponsoring today's video. And here's the Black Adam figurine all assembled. This is from Nikko Industries and available over on his website. Printed amazing on the Phrozen Mega 8K. And really happy to say that the print removed so much easier than I had with the Ultron helmets or any of the other files that I've printed off of the Mega 8K. This is also Nikko Industries Ultron helmet that I am still in the process of working my way through this particular project, hopefully before the end of the year where I'll have this fully finished and painted. So if you're working with Resin 3D printers and having some bed adhesion issues with prints either sticking to the build plate or sticking too well to the build plate and really difficult to remove, you might want to consider changing that bottom exposure setting. That certainly did the trick for me and made getting the prints off of that build plate so much easier. Thank you again to Nikko for sponsoring today's video. Again, you can find more information about the files that I've printed and shown off in today's video in the links down below. I wanted to also say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support. If you're interested in my Resin 3D printer settings or my support settings that I use for my Resin 3D printers, you'll find links to that over in my Patreon. As I mentioned before, I'll be doing some follow-ups on the Ultron helmet build and sharing it with you all here. Also, if you haven't already, consider following me on TikTok because I'm posting daily and more frequent updates on a lot of my project builds over there. Also, if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I'm so close to getting to 200,000 subscribers. I know I shouldn't be paying attention to those metrics, but I am. Hey, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.